everyone. Richard Carlton here. Welcome to another exciting day at fmtraining.tv. We create great FileMaker training. I'm going to move this little dialogue out of the way right there. Welcome to an awesome day, because today is a topic we've not covered before in our live training. It's really kind of a topic, I would say it's more mid-level seniors. So if you guys see Bunny or any of the brand new people there, feel free to give them some therapy. It's useful to understand kind of what's possible, but the technical mechanics of it are a little bit on the deep side. I think today is very, very exciting. So what we have going today, I want to introduce Jonathan Ray. Jonathan, are you there?
I'm here.
Can you, I don't know if you can show your screen or not, or where you're at, or show your face. We have a nice little picture of you here. If you can't show your face because you're, at the Walmart parking lot or something, shopping at Walmart, we understand. It's, for those of you not understanding Walmart, it's kind of like the wild place. There's Jay. Jay is one of our senior engineers, been around for a very, very long time. I hired Jay initially when he was like 15. I was paying him quite a bit of money per hour. His dad got really mad at me because I paid him too much per hour, and they thought it might corrupt him into an evil capitalist or something. It was really kind of a funny conversation. I remember that with your dad. He was mad at me. So, but it was an afternoon project. I wanted Jay to work really hard, so I paid him like 20 or 25 bucks an hour. This is like 15 years ago, and Jay kicked butt. It was awesome. So Jay is here as a senior engineer. He's certified and all sorts of FileMaker stuff. Today we're going to it's a two-part broadcast today. If you have questions about anything along the way, please ask questions. I want to welcome David. Sent me a whisper a little bit ago. People are chatting with me and starting the conversation. It's great. Please ask your questions. It's really important. So we are broadcast. Before we get too far into Jay's thing, we are broadcasting in high definition to Discord. We fixed that. YouTube and Twitch. And so you can watch on whatever platform you like, right? It's a lot of moving pieces to make all this work. So before I dive into Jay too much, let's just cover the obligatory stuff. So live broadcasting schedule right here. So I'm going to press the button. It goes over the top of Jay's head. And what we see right here is our upcoming broadcast schedule. Today and tomorrow are all about connecting a data source other than FileMaker to FileMaker, or Oracle, SQL, things like that. We're going to cover kind of the basics of it today. It's not something you really learn in an hour. It takes a little bit more work than that. Now, that's the upcoming broadcast schedule and some information like that. This broadcast is brought to you by fmtraining.tv, bringing you the greatest, I have to say that really good, greatest FileMaker training available on the FileMaker platform. Visit fmtraining.tv, and when you come down here, of course, you can see the tabs across the top. Live training is where we saw our upcoming schedule, the next 6 broadcasts. We do have individual courses. We outline them for you. However, we basically sell bundles anymore. We really don't sell the individual courses because we have so many courses. Some of you were complaining, but you're not the one who has to skew and create 5 or 6 new courses and 5, 6 new products every year. And so once you realized how much work it was, then that's why we have the bundle. So purchase the bundle, support the channel, support Nick, support myself. We had to collect some money. We finally got Nick his new laptop. He got him a new 16-inch laptop, and so he's very happy about that. I've been told that he might sell it to get some spinner wheels for his hot rod, so he might be selling his laptop and getting a fancy shiny wheels for his hot rod. But anyway, so feel free to help support the channel so we can keep Nick gainfully employed and entertained along with everyone else. Visit fmtrain.tv, check out the bundle buttons there. Really good training. So with that in mind, let's pivot back to Jay. So broadcasting about, so ODBC, ESS. What is ODBC? What is ESS, Jay? Do we want to jump to your slideshow now? Where are we at with this conversation?
Sure. Yeah, let's go ahead and jump to this slideshow I've put together, and we'll go we'll go over a couple things here. I want to talk about what we're going to be discussing over the next 2 days, and then we're going to focus specifically on ODBC and ESS during today. We'll focus more on the dynamics of WordPress and syncing between it and a FileMaker database tomorrow. But just to give you an idea, so we're going to dive into, again, WordPress and the syncing between it and FileMaker. Before we do, though, I want to say a word about WordPress, because this isn't going to matter too much if you're not acquainted with WordPress or understand why this is so neat. So WordPress, here's a couple little facts about it. Let's see, do I have to click? Yep. So WordPress, believe it or not, is powering 35% of all websites right now. WordPress is free, so it gives you, it allows for, like FileMaker, rapid development on the web, and you don't have to be a total web building ninja in order to use WordPress. That's why people like it. They don't have to pay for it, and they can set up a site in a relatively little amount of time. Okay, there are more than 1.1 million new registered WordPress domains every 6 months, which is pretty remarkable. There are currently 54,000 free plugins. And what a plugin is in WordPress, it's a little add-on that you add on to the base installation of WordPress. One of them is called WooCommerce, which allows you to do e-commerce systems by really just installing a free plugin with a click of a button. And what would have taken us, Richard, I don't know how much we would have charged to build an e-commerce system from the ground up, but
it would be north of $100,000 pretty easily.
Yeah. And so here we go with WordPress. Just one of the free plugins is a free e-commerce system that a bunch of websites use now, and makes things pretty easy. WordPress is not just for small and medium-sized businesses either. They account for almost a third of the top 1,000 websites out there. So that's one reason. Here are a couple of reasons why WordPress is pretty important, and the marriage between WordPress and FileMaker here with a sync is pretty cool. So maybe some of our listeners out there already have a WordPress website, and even the thought of connecting with a FileMaker, maybe you haven't even thought about this. So this will be a neat 2-day thing here. Okay. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to get into a demo first, and then show you exactly what's running the demo in the background. We'll get back to this slide in a second here. Okay. So I have a copy of FM Starting Point here, and I've made a couple of modifications to it, mainly a sync, a WordPress sync. It's a script that I wrote that retrieves all the orders on a particular site. I'm going to show you that in a second here. So this is a copy of our FM Starting Point 7 with a couple modifications to it. And also I have a quick WordPress website that I set up called mydummycompany.rcc.com. In a couple days, I'm sure we'll remove the site altogether. This is just a test website for our purposes here.
Okay, so this is one of those moments where you got to be careful. I had an engineer who put test data in a database one time and was making fun of the CEO of at the time it was PeopleSoft, and he got hauled into the CEO because he said that PeopleSoft CEO was douchebag and some other unsavory things, and it was just making up data because you're having fun. But then it inadvertently got published. So just so you know, the fast way to get a lot of attention is to accidentally post some random sample data that's not real. So anyway,
right, yeah.
This is a hot tip for everyone. So
yeah, and to be very clear, if you try to order something on this site, we're not going to ship anything to you, and we're not collecting money either. So
no, we will take the money.
We'll take your money, but we won't ship anything to you, right? Okay, so I'm going to, and just so you know, this entire site, this whole shopping system probably took me, 15 hours to set up from start to finish. That's how quick WordPress allows you to do things. The template that you're seeing here was free. I downloaded a template. I, made some plugin integrations, and then hooking it up with FileMaker took an additional 15 hours, or I'm sorry, an additional 5 hours. So about 20 altogether to create a website, connect it with FileMaker, and make the sync back and forth. It's pretty neat. So we're going to go ahead and do a sample order here, and let's go ahead and order this this watch. Apparently, it's a very expensive watch for $200, and we're going to check out. Okay, and here's it's going to ask for some billing details, and we're going to not put in a credit card. We're going to say we'll pay by check. So this again is just a sample so you can see the sync work. Okay, where I'm going to hit place order, and we're done. So that order has now been processed. And in the background, if you're familiar with WordPress, we're not going to get into a lot of details here, but this is what WordPress looks like in the background. And I can come here to my WooCommerce plugin and look at all my orders. Okay. And this one I see right now, this is the newest one. And the status by default is on hold. So if I click on it, you can see this expensive watch I just bought, and it has all my details here. Okay. The issue is getting the goal is to get all of this order data into FileMaker. And then if I do a change in FileMaker with that order data in my invoices right here, I want it to reflect back in WordPress, back and forth. You can do a lot more complicated things like managing inventory levels and a whole bunch of other things. And it's not just limited to this WooCommerce plugin. Like I said, there's 54,000 free plugins out there. And this is just one instance of being able to work with it. But as you see here, this is a record. So where is this record living right now? This record, this order record, is living in a SQL database that WordPress comes with. So when you fire up a WordPress website, you install WordPress, in the background, it's holding all of this data in a SQL database. Okay, so the goal is for FileMaker to connect to that SQL source in order to pull all of the data, and not just pull it, but be able to write changes to it. Okay, so I'm going to come here to my database. I'm going to open up invoices, and you can see I have 7 test records right now. Okay, I'm going to come to home, and I'm going to hit sync WordPress. Okay, so it took all of a second and a half, and it pulled my new order here. You can see for 200, and it pulled my info and all that sort of thing. And you can see that the status is on hold. I'm going to change that status to completed, for instance. Okay, that field has a script trigger that does a script that pushes the change back up to WordPress. So now if I refresh the page, let's just see where, yeah, so you see the status. Keep your eye on the status. When I refresh, you can see it changed to completed. So now we have a two-way sync. It pulled the data and it pushed changes back. Okay, so that's a basic demo. Again, you can do all sorts of complicated things. We're going to get into how exactly that push and pull works tomorrow. But right now, we're going to talk about how to establish the link between FileMaker and a SQL source. So we're going to have to divide this up into 2 days here. That's the little demo with the website. And from here on today, we're going to be working with how to do the SQL connection. These terms, we just have to cover them because it does get confusing. And I don't want to lose people by using all these acronyms on you without explaining it first. ESS is not the same thing as ODBC. So they're two separate things. One, ESS is a feature that FileMaker introduced in FileMaker 9. Okay, ESS stands for External SQL Sources. Okay, so ESS is a feature that allows FileMaker to talk to a SQL source. ODBC is the mechanism through which FileMaker can talk to an SQL source. Okay, it's the middleman that allows the two connections. It's like this. So you can imagine FileMaker database here, SQL or a MySQL source over here. It doesn't have to be WordPress. We're just using it as an example. So FileMaker ODBC SQL. Okay, and then so ODBC allows for very fast data transfer. Okay, ESS does not use ODBC to its fullest potential as far as speed goes, believe it or not. Okay, so it's like having a computer that, it's like having an internet connection that's only 500 kilobytes per second, whereas your computer could handle much faster speeds. Okay, so it is used or should be used as a data source, not necessarily as a replacement tool for all of your FileMaker tables, and it's because of a speed issue. We'll get into that a little bit more, but just know these are not the same thing, ESS, ODBC. An ODBC driver, okay, is a piece of software that supports ODBC communication to a particular data source. I'll show you what that is in a second here, okay? In order for FileMaker to talk to a SQL source, it uses ODBC, but you have to have a driver installed to talk to it. Just like you have to have a printer driver to talk to a particular printer, you have to have an ODBC driver to talk through ODBC to a SQL source, an Oracle system.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same thing I do for Nick. So I'm a Nick Hunter driver. So when he says like crazy crap, I can translate it for you, and so you understand.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
There's a question. David says, "Is ESS made by FileMaker?" Okay, so ODBC is not FileMaker. ODBC is generic. FileMaker can tap ODBC that's on a computer. Okay, so let me just answer some questions here before. I know Jay did this, but I'm just going to, before we get into the DSN. ODBC drivers on the Mac side are generally seen. That FileMaker has a company that they kind of work with called Actual Technologies. The guy's name is Jonathan Monroe. I've known him for years. He goes to DEF CON and stuff. I'm not sure if FileMaker pays him or he's just bored and does it, but he has this agreement where he kind of snuggles up next to Claris and FileMaker. They give him some inside stuff. He actually makes the drivers. He sells them for the Mac. On Windows, the drivers, I think, are largely available and free. But the drivers are not really FileMaker drivers. They are they're drivers that FileMaker will tap into on the computer, and then through those drivers, FileMaker can actually talk to an ODBC source. ODBC drivers typically will vary. Like you'll have an ODBC driver that can go out and talk to Oracle, or a different one that'll talk to MySQL certain versions, or Microsoft SQL certain versions, etc. Probably even WordPress, depending on what they're doing. So that's kind of how that works, right? So the driver is a piece that you have to install. FileMaker definitely will make use of that. ESS is made by, so David asked a question. ESS is basically a capability that you're going to see here in a second. It's not really a specific product. It's kind of this built-in capability, and FileMaker will show it to you. Is a standard. Pretty much everything that FileMaker does is not a standard. So whenever, David, you asked the question, like, does FileMaker do something that's a standard? FileMaker might use standards at some places that are out there on the internet, like they use Java. They will incorporate JavaScript or something like that into the product and use it in a web viewer. But FileMaker doesn't output things that become standards. They do everything proprietary, and then they charge money for it. So as a general rule, that's what you're going to see. So ODBC is standard. ESS is internal to FileMaker, and it is proprietary. Totally correct. ESS is not this loose thing that floats. Yeah, we'll show it to you in a second. And then, of course, Jonathan, if you want to get into the DSN here, that's the next step.
Okay. DSN, all you need to know for right now is it stands for data source name. That will be useful in a second. I don't need to explain that at this point. A shadow table and a shadow field. Okay, so when you add when you connect to a SQL source, FileMaker tries to mimic, FileMaker wants you to, what's the word? The purpose here is to interact with external data as if they were FileMaker data.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I have a couple questions here. People are still confused. So let me jump in here, Jay. And the reason I know this because I presented this at DevCon years ago, once or twice, right? So I've actually presented on this material. I really kind of detest this. I presented on it because Claire's came to me and said, "Would you present on this for us?" And I'm like, "Okay." At the time, I guess Wim DeCourt and all the other people that would normally do this were not available, and so I kind of drilled it down for basic users, right? So here's the way this works. So I'm drawing, and everyone can see my hands here, right? So I'm waving my hands. Ready? So you have the computer system and your operating system, and above that is a communication layer. We'll call that where the operating system communicates with TCP/IP and some things like that. Right next to that, you can install a driver that works with the communication layer that allows that communication layer to talk to other database systems. Okay, it's called typically an ODBC driver. Okay. A specific configuration of that ODBC, like if you write a configuration file for it, that ODBC driver to connect a certain way to a certain file with a certain username and password, that's a DSN. So that's a configuration that you set up where ODBC talks to a specific data source. So it will talk to WordPress on this IP with this username and password. That's a DSN. Okay. Now, FileMaker rides above that, if that makes sense. So FileMaker rides above it. It makes calls into the ODBC. It can import through ODBC. It can do all sorts of stuff through ODBC. What's interesting about this is that FileMaker, the ESS, is what FileMaker, and Jonathan's probably going to, oh, there's the diagram right there. But FileMaker is going to display, kind of fake display in the relational diagram, the Oracle data sources. Normally in the old days, the reason why there's ESS and like, is really when you deal with ODBC, you can do two things with it. You can actually import data through ODBC, which was the old way of doing stuff. And then I presented early on ESS, which is where FileMaker kind of looks through the ODBC and sees kind of what's structured there, like a table there or whatever view. It's called a view in SQL, right? For those of you who understand SQL. What can it see? And then it graphically displays that for you in your table. So it looks like it's a occurrence group. It's a table occurrence is what it is. And then you can cross connect it so you can see the data, right? That's what ESS is. It's ability to put it's almost like a phantom table on the relationship graph, right? Because it's there and you can relationally connect to it and see stuff. You can actually even go in there and define a summary field or a calculation field, but you can't make schema changes to it, right? Makes sense? It's kind of a big conversation. But the point is that it through basically that's why they're called shadow tables in terminology you saw a second ago. Shadow tables, Jay, if you want to go back that real quick. Shadow tables, shadow field. It's a phantom. It's not real, but it's a representation on your table occurrence graph of this other ODBC SQL data that's out there. And then you can relationally connect to it. The thing is it's not necessarily super fast if you're trying to process 1 billion records and you try to download them through SQL or ODBC or whatever. You know, you're probably using the wrong tool. If you're trying to chew through and do data warehousing and do analytics on, terabytes of ODB data that's in a SQL system, you should be using another tool besides FileMaker. That's not FileMaker's hallmark. It's not its strength. People learn FileMaker, they want to use FileMaker everything. And I'm the first one to tell you there are those handful of cases. If you have 100 things in the world you want to solve, I want a self-driving car, I want FileMaker to do, I want data warehousing of data. You come up with 100 different things you want to do technology-wise. FileMaker is going to do 85 of them pretty damn good. 5 of them it can do as a hack, and the other 10 you just shouldn't even go anywhere near it. So mass processing of ODBC data through SQL is not a great use of FileMaker. If you're processing 100 orders a day or 1,000 orders a day through FileMaker, through ODBC and ESS, that's fine. But people go, because that's a manageable, quantifiable number, 1,000, 582, or whatever it is. And how many orders does Macy's get online every day, assuming they're still in business, right? Pick someone else. Now, is it a good fit? Like if Amazon, right? Amazon gets orders a day, And if you were taking them into a SQL system and then processing them or somehow triaging and managing them in FileMaker, is that a good fit? No, because Amazon probably gets 1,000 orders every 2 minutes. Okay, it would overwhelm FileMaker. Just not a good fit of the technology. So there's places where this fits well. There's places where it doesn't fit well. And once again, Jay is going to get to a point. I'm going to quit interrupting, but that will answer a lot of questions. ODBC is faster than, yeah, but the problem is I'm not sure David understands. The reason I answered the question that lobster the way I did is I don't know people. Yeah, so why instead of me talking about, why don't we show and look at it? So Jay, as soon as you can get to a real demo, will be better, right? I'm not trying to circumvent your thing, but there's this conversation going over here. Okay. YouTube is pretty quiet, and Twitch is pretty quiet. Discord is pretty busy.
Okay, real quick. This is what you'll need to actually establish the connection. Obviously, a copy of FileMaker Pro. You have to have a supported version of SQL. We're not going to get into some of these things. These things will be obvious as we do the demo. Okay, so in FileMaker here, let's go to my. Here we go. Okay, so we're on a Mac, and on a Mac it's a little bit different than a PC, as Richard alluded to.
Where did this come? Where did this dialogue come from right here?
So ODBC Manager is an application on the Mac itself. This is not in FileMaker. This is an application that comes with a Mac. If it doesn't, then it's free to download, but a Mac does have a built-in ODBC Manager application. Just like you have a printer driver manager application somewhere in your utilities folder. So you have a piece of software that allows you to manage your ODBC drivers. That's what we're looking at right here. Okay, so I have set up, this is for our example here, my dummy. Okay, you can see that we're setting up a system DSN. This is local on my computer right now, and this that's important, and we'll see for a second here. Okay, the first thing that you'll need to do is install the actual driver. On a Mac, this is the extra step. Okay, on a PC, it already comes with these drivers. You don't have to go buy them from actual technology. Okay, where is it? Here is this website that we're talking about. So on a Mac, you have to actually buy the driver itself for $40. Okay, on a PC, it's built in. You just connect to it. We're not going to show you that example because we don't have enough time to do both operating systems.
Yeah, but it's pretty similar, right?
It's almost identical. Yeah. So the first step here would be to go to this website. If you're on a Mac, buy the driver. Okay. The second step is to come here to the ODBC Manager and install the driver. Or actually, when you download it, you double click on it and it'll install it for you. So you'll come here and you'll see actual open source databases will be in your list after you install it. Without that, it's not going to work at all. Okay. The second step here is to establish a connection between the ODBC Manager and your. You have to say, you have to have the IP address of where your SQL database is living, and basically the username, what amounts to the username and password. So on this one, if I double click, it'll walk you through kind of the wizard, and you give it a name. You can name it whatever you want, and you would specify here MySQL for WordPress. It also supports SQLite and Postgres. On the Windows, I think there's also options to support DB2 and other Oracle systems. That's a little beyond the conversation right now, but just know you select MySQL for WordPress. You continue. This is the server right now. Sometimes you could put in an IP address. We're using a domain name. Either one works. The port will default to 3306. You don't have to remember that off the top of your head, okay? And then the final step, you have to, where is it? I'm just calling this WordPress, or actually, it'll give you a drop down of available databases for this this user, I believe.
Yeah, you didn't specify the user, so
yeah, I didn't specify the user in here.
But basically, I mean, without us breaking our demo, this is kind of the way it works. You're going to specify the location of the file, username and password. It's going to give you the database essentially that you're going to get, and then from there, you just continue and you finish the setup. So
it's done.
This is the part that always kind of drives me nuts, getting this just right. I mean, I guess it's a little bit more reliable these days. I was doing this 25 years ago, and I wanted to scream. Literally scream.
This is
I hate this.
This is the one part that is that's the most difficult, because it requires you to install something at the system level, on the operating system. It's like installing a plugin. That's the hard thing about using a plugin, is this extra step. So once the system DSN is established, it's working, there's a little test button you can press to make sure that it's working. The hard part is kind of done at that point. We can close this down here, okay? And then in FileMaker, this is my source file. You go up to File, Manage, External Data Sources, all right? And now you have to tell FileMaker that you want to connect to the SQL database using that system DSN that you just created, right? So we already did the hard part. All we're doing now, and this one's already created, and so I'll just hit edit. All we're doing now is saying we want to establish a connection using ODBC, and then you specify what DSN you're talking about. This one is the My Dummy one. And then you click, you put in your username and password that's from the SQL database, right? So wherever you're getting your data from, whether it's from WordPress or some other SQL source, you will need a username and password, and then you should be good to go. Your privileges for that database, like what you're allowed to view, what you're allowed to do, is determined on the SQL server. That's a whole nother discussion that we're really not getting into today. We just want to show you how to make the connection. So I already have a username and password set up that I did beforehand, okay? I put my username and password in, and if it accepts it, it'll do a check right there. If it accepts it, then you're good. If not, it'll say something like, couldn't establish the connection because your password or your username is not correct, etc. After this, okay, now we're going to go into Manage Database, and you can see what we can do here. We'll go into Relationships, and where is it? Here, let me zoom out just a tad because it's just huge on my end. That didn't help. Okay, you can see that a local table that's local to this file is in regular plain text. The dead giveaway that this relationship or this table occurrence is from an external file is it's in italics. And so I know right away that this is coming from a file that's external to this file that I'm working on, WordPress integration demo, right? If I double click on one of these, you can see that the data source where it's coming from is not the current file. The data source is this ODBC database connection that we just set up, or we just took a look at. And you can see all of these tables, what FileMaker is treating as a table. These are what's called views in MySQL. In SQL, these are called views. FileMaker treats them as tables and fields. And so you have to know which view you want to you're pulling your data from. Sometimes that takes a little bit of guesswork. You have to find the one until you find what you're looking for. In this case, I already have it set up. I already know what tables I need. Okay, so if I wanted to create, say, a new table occurrence, and I didn't have any of this here, okay, I would come here to New, and here are all the tables defined in my solution, right, in the base copy of FM Starting Point, and I say, no, I don't want the data in my solution. I want to pull from WordPress using this ODBC. So I click on that, and now here is all the tables I can access. The ones I'm really interested in are the WooCommerce tables. That's where all the order info is stored at, right? And so if I click on, say, order items, for instance, and I hit OK, now it created a new table occurrence in FileMaker, and it's treating that table occurrence, that SQL view, as a FileMaker table. Okay, here's what I mean by that. If I go into tables and I scroll down, everything in plain text up here, I know is local to this file. All right, the ones at the very bottom that are in italics, those are the table occurrences that are from my SQL source. They're in italics here, so I know they're from outside the file. If I double click on one of these, you can actually see the fields that are defined in that SQL view or table.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt. Don't forget where you're at. I'm going to interrupt. So, important to understand here. One is that in order for this data to come here and to look at this, you have to be able to have a live connection to this other SQL system. So if your internet's down, this quits working, right? The other part of this, very, very, very important, is that you see it in here doesn't mean you can change it. Anything that's in here that was pre-built by the administrators, you cannot touch it. And when I drew that, I did a double box here, but most of you probably see that one way or the other. But you get the idea. Now you can add now. So understand that if the data comes through here, it's important to understand that one, the data is live. Two, because of that liveness, that urgency of continuous connectivity, if you have an internet issue or internet outage, well, if your database is off on the internet somewhere, then you probably don't have access to FileMaker anyway, but you could have an outage with that source, that in our case, WordPress happens to be up on an Amazon data center, so it'd be highly unlikely we'd have an outage from Amazon, but you get the idea. You can add a field here if it's limited to a summary field or it's a calculation field, because what happens is FileMaker is not allowed to push schema changes to SQL. Okay, it cannot do that. It cannot push SQL schema changes there. But if we define a local, what appears to be a calculation field or a summary field, FileMaker locally saves the data and then kind of shows that to us as needed, right? So because remember, if you define a summary field or a calculation field, really you're not changing the schema. Those things are generated on demand by FileMaker, right? Pretty interesting, right? So you couldn't change any of fields they already have. You can't add a number field because that would force the SQL system to store new data, right? So as long as we don't interfere with the storage of data on the SQL side, we have certain limited rules we can play with. This stuff is all over the certification test for those of you wondering about that stuff.
So here you can see a good rule of thumb is that if it's in italics, you can't modify it. Okay? You can't push a structural schema change from FileMaker to the SQL source. You can look at it, you can view what options are checked on it, but you can't modify it. If a field is not in italics, here's a good example here. This is one that I created. It's a calculation field that I can make changes to. And so here it's kind of squashing two fields together for a particular reason. You can create calculation fields and summary fields, but no, just as the rule of thumb, if it's in italics, you can view it, you can't modify it. If it's not, it means it's local to this file, and you can do whatever you'd like with it, as long as it's a calculation or summary field. Okay, I'm going to cancel out of here. And then here's what you can see. Let's just create a new layout. Go into layout mode, new layout. Now that that table occurrence is in my relationship graphs, it means I can attach a layout to it. Okay, so all the way down at the bottom, you have all these WordPress tables. Say I want to do the posts. That's one that's going to be with every single WordPress installation. I call this like posts test. Okay, and I'm just going to make it a table view. Hit finish, and here are all the fields I can put on it, and I'll put them all. And now you see here, it's treating this SQL data as if it is a FileMaker table with a FileMaker layout, FileMaker records, FileMaker fields.
So this is the ESS part. The ESS part was everything at the table occurrence graph level where you saw that in there, and you're interacting it here. This is the ESS part. It's almost like this extra effort, because most of the time you would not be able to interact with it like this. You could do an import, a script step, where you'd set up the ODBC, or you come under here and you'd say go to File J, and you actually still might probably enter as import. Yeah, there it is. And then you'd see this thing here, right? And then because you have the ODBC set up and the DSN set up, and you went through those driver installs, you could get to it this way. So this is the old school way. And according to NetLobster, she says it's still faster, which very well could be. Because one strategy would be, remember, this data is all coming. It's not really cached locally. It's all across the internet. That's why it's not super fast. I mean, can we download 1,000 records this way? Yeah. Can we download 1,000,000 records this way? Yeah, maybe if you give it 2 days to download. So one item thought I always had with ESS was to create a local table and move the data or sync it to the data that's locally. Right? That's, once again, you get into performance issues, things like that. Not really part of the conversation, but so much. Listen, Nick is here, and Nick is going to curse me all night if I don't talk about some performance issues and lean design stuff. So the issue is that if you're doing lightweight ODBC stuff, that's one thing. If you're doing heavier ODBC stuff, you might want to figure out how to sync the data, not necessarily interact with it through ESS, because it's just generally too slow for big data movement. But download it, synchronize it with even MirrorSync. Synchronize the stuff. MirrorSync will synchronize between SQL and FileMaker, right? That's, we didn't cover that when we did that enterprise stuff about a month ago, but it'll do it. It will do it, and then you have local data. Then it's as fast as you can do it with Nick's lean design, right? So
yeah, and let's just do that right now. This isn't part of my notes, but I think this is helpful. So if we do import records from ODBC source, and I say I want this one that we set up here. Oh man, I gotta specify it. 1 second. I have it written down.
You have it written down? Okay.
Yeah.
Because this is really educational, I think, for people to understand what this is
so you
about.
Specify your thing. Okay, and then I choose the table I want. All right.
The columns you want.
All the columns, I guess. Do I have to? Oh no, I don't want different columns. You would have to know a little bit of SQL in order to import it. It's not like a regular FileMaker import. Let's see. I don't think that's the option I want. I think it's import.
Yeah, I know. I'm having the same moment. I'm having the same moment you are, because I haven't done this literally in a long time. And
I think there is an option where it'll give you like the default FileMaker import dialog. There's also that option that we just saw where you'd have to write real SQL code,
yes,
which I'm not going to do on the spot.
Yeah, there's no way.
But yeah, anyways. So you can add different layouts and attach them to this the external sources like we just saw, and you get your records, and you can interact with them just like you would any record. So I can make a change here if I wanted to. The moment I commit the change, that SQL source is going to reflect that change. It's talking back and forth. So there is no additional scripting that's involved here. That is an advantage of of playing with it, playing with the data this way. It's visual. You can do finds just like you would in FileMaker on this stuff, and that type of thing. A thing you have to watch out for is that because this is an SQL source, let's just pull it up again. You have to watch out for indexing, right? On a regular FileMaker table, there's automatic indexing that you can turn on. Whereas indexing, and then you can check it that says automatically create indexing, which makes the sorting and the finding a lot faster. But in SQL, you cannot, I can't just double click in here and manage the indexing. I don't have any control over it. So if you try sorting on, say, 10,000 records from ESS, it's going to churn and churn and churn and be very slow. So you have to watch out for that type of thing. You have to use ESS in a very targeted way, right? You don't do lots of finds or sorting on it. You're basically trying to get the data that you need and then push the changes that you need back and forth to it. And that's the real advantage of using this. To push it beyond that is just not a good idea as far as performance goes.
Yep. Now there's a sync button up there, Jay. You want to refresh my memory what the sync button does for us?
All right. So say a year from now, say I don't touch this for a year, the actual schema part, and someone on the SQL end, say WordPress, updates their views and they add a couple fields to it, or they rename something, and that's never a good idea to rename a field, but say they add a couple new ones. Well, it's not going to reflect here until you come up here and manually hit sync, and then sync will give you the new fields. It'll update the list of fields from that SQL view. That's kind of how that works. But you have to manually do that, and that's fine because not a lot of structural changes happen, or at least they shouldn't.
Right. Mostly it should be locked in because we're dealing with the WooCommerce, which is a customer-facing product that they're shipping.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. In fact, in the old days, one of the problems, you press the sync button, it would break stuff. So the goal was for it to not, unnecessarily would break things. I mean, some things obviously can get broken, and it makes sense that they would break, but just like, for example, if it couldn't reconnect, and it would trash the table occurrences and stuff like that. It's just Claris has had to, or FileMaker, or whatever we want to call them these days, they've had to work on that quite a bit over the years. I think it's in a pretty good position now. I think they largely are maintaining it there. I don't see them adding a lot to it, but they still keep it functional and running, it would seem, Jay. So what's next on our list, Jay?
So the deal is, once you get to this point and you've established the connection, now you have to kind of figure out how the SQL tables themselves work, right? In regard to WordPress, I had to go in and figure out, all right, how is the data structured? Like, okay, I have access to this info here, and that's all well and good, but what do I do with it? It just looks like a bunch of stuff. Where is it? I'm trying to find a good view. Sorry. All right, let's just go to this one. There, WP posts. Yeah. So this is just a bunch of fields, and you have to figure out, all right, what field is the field inside the WooCommerce orders? How do I update the inventory? And you have to figure out which field goes with what, right? That's kind of the difficult part. Sometimes the plugin manufacturers will actually tell you, here's how we set up our tables, and that will help you out. But the reason you want to do that is if you're writing scripts back and forth, right, you need to know what field you need to set here. So what I'm saying is, if you have an order that is on hold or it's pending payment, and then you change that in FileMaker to say paid or completed, you want to come into the correct record, change the status to paid or completed or whatever, and then the order on the WordPress side will change correctly. But you have to know which field that is. So it takes some figuring out in order to do that. I don't know if I explained that very well.
So Moki's saying he said, or he or she or whoever this is, I'm thinking about today's lessons. Obviously nice for a personal WordPress-based web store with FileMaker running locally, right? And my only comment to that would be is that normally if I was going to roll this out for a customer, I would put the drivers and ODBC on the server so all the clients could access it, all your FileMaker clients could access it. I also think
that's this graphic here.
Yeah, I also think it would scale pretty well to most businesses who have a web front end. Once again, if you're chewing through many thousands of orders per day, then probably you should, in this application, not be using necessarily FileMaker for that. Mookie says, well, maybe good for simple databases you want to share with a few people without having to buy a bunch of FileMaker licenses. Well, all right, so back up. So this is like one of those funny kind of conversations. So, and Norgandine, I think, is going in a little different direction, so I'm going to hold up on his for a moment. But Moki, you know, if listen, I don't know what your hourly rate is worth, but most people who do serious SQL work who are good and have a resume, etc., are 200 plus an hour, if not more. And so the rub is with this is that if you're spending, you know, if you were going to spend, you know, $200 an hour building stuff, and you're working to try to avoid paying, you know, basically $100 a year for a user in FileMaker. If you buy any sort of volume license, you can get the cost down to about $100 per user per year. You're penny wise and pound foolish is the old term, right? I guess. I mean, my concern is that we're going to work really hard to save $500 on licensing, but then meanwhile we're doing all this other SQL stuff, and that's going to be, you know, $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 of work. So that's kind of my concern about that, because SQL stuff can get expensive really fast. So I understand people who use FileMaker and they're not doing a lot of coding, they don't have programmers, they're trying to use it for their personal VCR, VHS tape library, right? Was one from years ago, or CD library. But then FileMaker gets expensive and it prices itself out of the market. I get all that. But with SQL, if you're already playing with SQL and stuff like that, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I got some people who just hate paying license fees. They don't mind paying labor rates, but they hate paying license fees. I want to pivot to Organdine real quick. So there's a lot of questions flying around here. So Organdine, if you have used MySQL fields and then changed the names of the fields in SQL, then sync, the new fields will show up in the FileMaker table, but the old abandoned names will too. They will not be automatically remapped in FileMaker. Yeah, that gets back to Organdine's comment. Largely is one of the things that people would get mad about SQL and Oracle and these other data systems about. Renaming things, deleting things, things like that. A lot of times you cannot necessarily delete things or rename them. It's just not a permitted thing you can do. So obviously there's newer versions of SQL and stuff like that. Maybe they fix those issues. But I remember back in the day, people hated that because they were amazed you go into FileMaker, rename a field or delete a field, and it wouldn't explode and light itself on fire. David says, before mounting a FileMaker database to a server with ODBC connections, you need to create the DSN connection. It doesn't matter the order you do it in, David. I think you can put the file up there and then do the ODBC connection on the server, and then log in through Pro and tell it to connect. It should work that way. When I demoed it at DEF CON, that's the way we did it. We ran it on a server and had the server set up, and then go into Pro and tell it that. And Pro would be smart enough to talk to server and say, oh, hey, there's an ODBC driver on the server. Let's go through that.
Yes. And to be clear there, if you don't install the DSN on the server, but you want all your users to access the data, you have to install it on every single user's computer, which is bizarre. If you already have FileMaker server, why not just do it there?
Yeah.
The reason that you would have to do it on every single person's computer is if you're on something like FileMaker Cloud, where you can't log into the server and do system level stuff. They just give you a website to go to. You don't have control over the server itself, so to speak.
And we have not tried ODBC on Cloud 2, so I'm not going to entertain questions on that. I know Cloud 1, you could kind of do it, but you could also SSH into the Cloud 1 server. And there is FileMaker Cloud 1 and FileMaker Cloud 2. Cloud 2 is a product in market. Some people still have FileMaker Cloud 1, and but it'll be deprecated in January of next year.
2021.
So this coming year, yeah. So we'll see. I don't know what deprecated means. I don't know if they're just going to shut people off because I just don't know.
I think it's 2021. It might be 2022.
I don't. Yeah, I'll have to go back and check on that. But if you're on Cloud 1, you should be already actively moving to something else, either your own FileMaker server or move to Cloud 2. A lot of questions are whizzing around here. Oregon Dean, the DSN ties the table name which talks to my ESS. ESS to my SQL. Yep, good comments, questions here, Oregon Dean and Omoki back and forth. Yeah, I listen. So it's so funny because I got an engineer who's definitely not here, but he got. Yeah, I had an engineer, a senior engineer works for me kind of intermittently. I've never really talked about him here. If he was here, he would know who I'm talking about. And he got really pissed off with Claris on some licensing stuff. Not that it's without justification. I understand that. But he got almost militantly anti FileMaker about their licensing. Like, I mean, like there's some guys out in the FileMaker community. FileMaker is busily giving awards to practically all sorts of people out there, and those people turn around and knife FileMaker in the back 12 months later, right? It's kind of funny. I sit here after 30 years of watching, I still watch this happen. And then if you someday we'll have to have an offline conversation where we make sure there's no Claris people here and we talk about the all the behind the scenes mayhem over the years that's gone on. But there were some of these guys. Hal Gumbert was one, and then Tim, I can't remember his name. He got awards for all sorts of stuff, and then he promptly turned around because Claris was really trying to make money. They simplify their product to they allow you to do things faster, but they charge for that, right? So people, I had this engineer come to me. It was really funny. It was about a year and a half ago. He sat me down and says, I can build this in Postgres and with whatever he was using, and I can make this database, and it's amazing. And I'll just do a basic asset tracking database. So he spends 90 minutes beating himself on the wall. I'm watching him go. He builds a file that has no licensing cost to it at all because it's basically effectively like a MySQL open source file. The rub with what ends up happening with this guy, I guess I should be showing myself when I'm talking here. What's happened with this is that I didn't say this time because I didn't want to get in a fight with this guy. But I'm sitting there watching and going, I could build this file in less than 10 minutes in FileMaker. And he spent 90 minutes building it in SQL and getting it to work and this and that and the other thing.
Zoho.
And Zoho, that's, I don't know if it was Zoho or whatever. Yeah, might be that. I can't remember. Anyway, so the rub is that as long as you're willing to pay him $150, $200 an hour to build that crap for you, then you just saved yourself 10 minutes you didn't have to spend. And you don't have to pay the licensing fees, right? But if we're talking about your entire app, it takes you 90 minutes to build. None of you here are like that. I guarantee everyone here watching this has got applications that take weeks, if not months, to build. If I said throw it away, build brand new, it'd take you months, maybe more than a year to build it, right? And so how much is your time worth, right? I'm not trying to tell you one way is right or wrong. I'm just saying there's two paths forward. One path is cut the corner, save yourself the time, but pay the licensing for the better tech, or I would say tech that makes your time investment less. Or you can go down the road of screw the licensing. I don't want to pay licensing. I can't say the F word big enough for you. F. I'm not going to pay licensing, but I'm going to spend 5 or 6 times the amount of time building it, right? In whatever other system that's open source, whatever. And so, yeah, there's always a trade-off, right? And Tim Dietrich was the guy's name. That was the guy's name who got into it with Claris. And then they gave him all these awards, and he turned around and within about 6 to 12 months, really publicly knifed him in the back. I mean, it was a major deal, major deal. So yeah, Tim Dietrich, yeah, says Zoho. So yeah, Benedict knows about this stuff. Benedict's there commenting, for the record, I have WordPress set up for my company employees and support system. Works fine. But I really should link it back to FileMaker so I can store the tickets and stuff in FileMaker. Yeah, so Benedict, Benedict, definitely good comment. I missed it here because there's like all these comments going on here. And there's a big conversation. We can pick this up tomorrow, but yeah. So yeah, Tim Dietrich was Zojo, and Zojo is this, whatever, front end / back end / whatever this is. I don't remember what it is because I don't use it. But there's engineers that love it, and they're like, oh, I can do all this great stuff, and that's fine. And what I found out was that Tim Dietrich, knifed FileMaker in the back, literally, corporate, publicly, very very publicly, and then went off, and he basically quit promoting it. So then he would do projects, and he would offer his customers, various options on how they would do the project, and they could be either SQL or FileMaker. And he still does some SQL work, but these guys, it's I think there has to be a moderating voice in things, right? And then Claris turns around and does this thing where they tried to jam me up for, I don't know, $15,000 in licensing for Claris Connect, and they want to know why I didn't go out there and knife them, but I just kind of said, hey, it's not a good fit for my company, right? Next week we're doing, or in 2 weeks we're doing Claris Connect with Calvin. We're going to talk about the economics and the models of that. So the problem is Claris is Apple. And Apple goes by this motto, goes back to Jobs, you go back and understand what he does. He would buy parts for 30 cents and sell them for $9. And Wozniak thought if he bought a part for 30 cents, he should sell it for $2 or something like that. And Jobs absolutely demanded to extract the maximum amount of money out of people. And that's Apple. That's also Claris. Welcome to the world. So what Claris is wrestling with is this whole concept of how far can they turn the screws to the customers to get the money out of them. Literally, it's that simple. There's a new management team. They're trying to turn the screws more, and there's been a huge blowback and hit, right, from them. And that's this is actually after Tim. And so whenever that happens, you can see the Tim Dietrichs and Hal Gumberts winding up going, see, we told you so, see, we told you so. And people like me have to just kind of drive around the conversation because it puts us in a very tough position of trying to defend some behavior that if we were there, decisions we would not have made, right? So, and it's not our company. They don't write me a check. So, and I'm not trashing them. I'm just saying there's more than one way forward in life. FileMaker's not a good fit for everything, just not. So, cool. All right, we're going to catch it. Thanks, Jay. We'll catch it tomorrow, and then next week we're going to be diving out on the FileMaker version 19.1.2, which is their first rolling release. Occurred yesterday morning, I think. So we will talk more about that next week. But for 99% of the people out there, it's the same product you had before. So that's it. See ya.
Guys just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected the quarterback. Great read, good patience. More importantly, Great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Try to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap. Stands in, throws it left for Amendola. Reaches up and snags a high throw and lands inside the 10. Rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.